So hello everybody, thank you for joining this session. My name is Adrian Cooper. I'm the Field CTO for the UK Public Sector team, and I'm very pleased to be presenting this session with our colleagues at SNS. And the topic of this conversation is really just to reflect on the importance of having appropriate data backup and retention capabilities as part of your overall IT infrastructure. Talk about some of the threats that exist to what is now, fairly mission critical data that's typically being stored on our IT systems, and talk about some of the ways that we as NetApp have developed capability to allow our customers to have a very, very cost effective, very rapid backup and recovery solution to protect against a number of those threat realms. So let's get started. And I think in terms of an agenda, I'm just going to cover briefly, why data protection is important, some of the common causes for failure that we need to be aware of, just to highlight some of our data protection solutions, and then just a bit of a call to action at the end. So we're trying to keep these sessions short and sweet, so we'll rattle through this fairly quickly. So data now is a fundamental aspect of pretty much every organization's operation, whether they be private sector, public sector, charitable, education, etc. All organizations are, across the globe really now rely on data to be as cost effective, efficient, flexible in the way that they deliver services to their customers, and in the way they generate value for stakeholders within their organizations. And for our part, NetApp have a very, very strong heritage. I think now is our 27th year in the industry as storage and data protection specialists. We work with organizations across all of these fields to deliver solutions which allow them to maintain the closest possible control of their critical data assets. And if we look at typically the things that we need to protect against, and I think we're going to highlight 3 or 4 of these as we go through. The first one is really associated with component failure, and this is a component failure which might occur on any aspect of the IT infrastructure which is deployed within an organization, or indeed deployed by a cloud provider or a service provider that's delivering capabilities to your organization. And effectively, aspects of that infrastructure might be more prone to failure because they are mechanical or subject to heat, for example. And really what's happened is over the course of probably the last 30 or 40 years, the vendors and providers of this infrastructure have created ways in which they can provide very highly available, redundant infrastructure to mitigate against these component failures. So we're not really going to address this as a topic of conversation today, but I just wanted to highlight that it is one of the things that needs to be considered. So dual pathing, high availability, built-in redundancy are the types of things that are employed in order to reduce the risk of this component level failure. But perhaps we're more interested by things that happen in more of the sort of physical and application layers, and the first point to talk about is user and operator area, and this is as important as anything else when we're talking about a strategy for backup and recovery. So you've got things ranging from users mistakenly deleting files through to database or storage administrators unintentionally disconnecting databases, or pulling the wrong cable, or doing something which has a operational impact on the services which are delivered to the end users. And I think what one needs to be cognizant of in the present time is that as systems are becoming more and more significant for the day-to-day operation of a business, the impact of any individual failure tends to be magnified very quickly, and the impact of that failure can be felt more significantly across an organization much more rapidly than perhaps was the case a few years ago. So this type of error is actually sort of also more commonplace than perhaps some may realize, simply because, you know, as humans we are, you know, we have the human frailties that mean that occasionally we make mistakes, and despite the best operating processes and policies, sometimes these mistakes will happen, and therefore we need to be aware of them. Of more significance, however, and something which is getting much more conscious in terms of press coverage and general awareness, is malicious attacks, ransomware in particular, delivered through malicious emails or phishing attacks or whatever they may use to effectively make changes to, in some cases, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of files on a corporate system, which can take a significant length of time to recover from, and which can cause a very significant impact to one's business. I think it was Honda recently talked about having a ransomware attack that affected their global operations, that impacted their ability to manufacture vehicles for, I think, up to 36, 48 hours in some of their global plants, and affected the way in which they can deliver services. And also, I think Garmin was the other high-profile casualty of this type of attack, which took offline not only their sort of consumer services, but also very important services such as their navigation capabilities for light aircraft, etc. So this subject is becoming something which is increasing in both, unfortunately, occurrence, and also has a more and more significant impact over time. And then you've got failure of the application, and you've got failure of the infrastructure, application-related infrastructure itself. And we all know that despite the best efforts of software developers, bugs will appear. Users will deploy applications, use applications in a way perhaps not expected from the outset, that causes corruption or causes data to be overwritten, or to cause an otherwise a failure of the integrity of a database, for example. And then you've got, you know, effectively the context of a more significant disaster. So I think this could be through natural disaster, fire, flood. I think the significant period of wet weather that we had in the UK at the beginning of this year, that caused some data centers to flood, and generally IT systems don't work very well underwater, as you can imagine. But also you've got, you know, other human error, power outages, etc. So these are more significant in their scale and more impactful due to the fact that it's likelihood to affect more than one operational system as a result of this. So putting a bit of a summary on all of that then, you know, we talked about high availability being the sort of strategy which is most likely to apply to component failures. You can see that actually, other than in a disaster scenario, backup and recovery is really what we use as the primary method of protecting against user errors, malicious attacks, and application failures. Of course, sometimes there is a need to revoke to business continuity or DR, and the second strategy of panic in the event of a disaster is a bit of a jovial reference to the fact that those instances tend to be very stressful and ones which cause the organization the greatest potential disruption. And what we're seeing is the emergence of functions and people within the business that are taking a much more sophisticated view across this as we look to deploy services in the cloud and the public cloud, and the role of site reliability engineers and others are being created really for individuals to be able to look at these in the most holistic manner possible. And I think the other thing that's important to understand is that the traditional technology that's available to us in order to be able to provide various ways of backing up and recovering data are also changing, moving away typically from tape to disk backup and cloud backup, mainly because organizations need more aggressive recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives. And that reflects, as I say, the importance of these systems to underpin digital activities, as I said earlier, and the need for organizations to be returned to a working state with the minimal of disruption. What we have at the bottom is also a reflection of the fact that replication, data replication, either asynchronously or synchronously, will obviously potentially give you the best recovery point and recovery time objectives, but that tends to come with additional cost for hardware and software to achieve that type of capability. And I think what's important to say from a NetApp perspective is, we support all of these types of techniques. What we are going to talk about, however, more specifically, is the way that we can utilize snapshots within our storage and data management platforms to give you a very, very cost-effective, very rapid way of being able to deliver the core backup and recovery services that you need to recover from the majority of these situations that we've talked about. So with that in mind, let's just talk about a couple of scenarios then. Let's start off with effectively a sort of overview of the core snapshot technology. This fundamentally allows you to take a point-in-time copy of a volume of data. That data can be user files, Word files, Excel files, as we're showing here, or can be databases and other business-critical information. That snapshot comes at very little penalty in terms of the storage it consumes on our system, and very little penalty in terms of downtime, and provides not only with the ability for the user to restore data. So if they, for example, deleted an Excel file, they can look at a copy of that volume or directory and they can restore themselves that file, or indeed that can be done on their behalf by an operator. So that can be file level, or it can be obviously the entire contents of a directory, should that be required. Now, we have a number of different platforms within our portfolio. For those of you that are familiar, the capability of snapshots it delivers as core part of our primary storage platforms, and also our cloud-based solutions working with Azure, AWS, and Google in the form of cloud volumes. But it's not something currently that's provided through StorageGrid, which is an object storage platform, but we do object replication natively within that platform that typically allows a copy of data to be replicated to an additional endpoint or location to give you a multiple copy of those files. The key thing really here is that you can take snapshots multiple times per day. I think that you can take up to 1,000 snapshots per volume, and the recovery of data in terms of the restore is very rapid and can be delegated down to the end user. So is very effective and very efficient to cover that user operator level error that we talked about earlier. In the event of malicious attacks, we can deploy a very similar mechanism. Snapshot copy gives us the ability to create a read-only copy of a volume of data, and should the live volume of data undergo some sort of malicious attack, it's possible for the operator to create a clone of that snapshot. We call that a flex clone. That then is a writable version of that volume of data, and then the user can recover files from that clone of data. The cloning is a particular capability of ONTAP, which is very significantly differentiated from other services in the market, particularly when deployed in the cloud, because it avoids the need to use lower performance tiers of storage to recover from backup. And again, it comes at very low penalty because of the way that we control the file system on the ONTAP platform to deliver this capability. We also work with a number of third parties who can offer additional plugins and capabilities to detect ransomware protection by looking at access behaviors for file systems and detecting malicious activity before it becomes more widely apparent. And this can also help to reduce the impact of that malicious activity on your infrastructure. And if one then looks at the context of how we provide support, if you like, and protection for application level failures, we can actually use that snapshot capability to take a backup copy of a live production database or a development database environment. And we have a software capability called Snapshot, which integrates with all of the leading enterprise database application providers, such as Oracle, SAP, SQL Server, etc., and also can be, under a community support model, extended to give you application-aware backups of things like MongoDB, MySQL, Postgres, DB2, etc. Again, the way that works is that effectively Snapshot calls via a sort of software API, a snapshot to be performed at the storage level, which is very, very efficient. That puts the database into the right state to allow that backup to be taken. And then should there be a failure of the primary copy, we can create a writable volume from that backup so that the database can be restored. And through things like rollback logs and others, can return the database back to the correct form of integrity should that need. We are also working on our HCI platform to provide that similar capability for Docker-based and container-based applications and OpenStack, CloudStack environments as well, via a set of published APIs, which can be called directly from your platform of choice. The key there is to provide what we call crash consistent snapshot copies where possible, and also to be able to provide plugin APIs which can be integrated very tightly to deliver application in minutes rather than several hours or days, which it would ordinarily take in the event of this type of application failure. And then, just touching on the portfolio that we have to provide support for wider disaster scenarios. We talked about being able to synchronously or asynchronously copy data between sites. We can do this across a data center or across a distance, depending on the bandwidth and latency of the link that you have joining two data centers. And briefly, that works in a very, very similar way by being able to take either to write two copies of data to two independent locations, or to take a snapshot copy and then mirror that snapshot copy asynchronously to another site. From a NetApp perspective now, we can do that in a very flexible manner into the cloud, should you wish to use the cloud as your secondary storage, using something like Cloud Volumes ONTAP. And or you can use that as a tertiary site should you also wish to provide a read-only version of a snapshot for compliance purposes. And again, it is MetroCluster, the capability that we provide customers with natively within our ONTAP platform should you require synchronous replication of data, which typically gives you a more aggressive recovery time and recovery point objective. And then just thinking about backup, we also within NetApp have a long heritage and a very open partner program that enables us to work with a number of vendors, and some of the vendors that you can see there, Veeam, Commvault, Rubrik, and others, are providing sort of more extensible backup solutions. Those tools can be deployed and utilized to create a sort of heterogeneous backup environment where they can utilize the sort of inherent snapshot capability and can be used to back up data into a tertiary storage platform, either using NetApp or other storage platforms, or indeed into the cloud. And we are working alongside these vendors to ensure that we have the best form of interoperability and the sort of most complete set of partner solutions in the market to enable our customers to achieve their overall backup objectives. And you can see here that we're also working to provide a very cost-effective object storage platform in the form of what we call Storage Grid, which can also be used as a backup target as well. And this chart just builds out to give you an idea of the various capabilities that are delivered through those three primary backup partners, as you can see on the slide as well. So, sort of putting this all together and delivering it in terms of a holistic view from a NetApp portfolio perspective, we have tried to provide this very, very elegant, designed-in capability of providing very effective snapshot-based backup for primary data centers, secondary data centers, and for cloud-based stores. You can see there that we have the ability through SnapMirror and SnapVault to create replicated copies of data should the need arise, and that's done and controlled natively within our ONTAP operating system without the need to deploy expensive third-party tools and to learn complicated additional environments. That's something that's sort of built in and widely used within the industry. And this then just provides a sort of quick reference to how we deliver protection in each of those different failure domains that we talked about earlier, from delivering very robust, highly available platforms that deliver 6 nines availability at a hardware level, through to the ability to do ransomware recovery, native and cloud backup, as well as providing non-disruptive testing and RPO0 type environments through our Metro Cluster environment as well. And all of that designed to keep your data safe, keep your applications running, and your business performing at all times. So that was a very quick run through. I hope that was useful in providing you some context. Please use the platform that SNS are providing to ask questions, attend follow-up sessions, which we will be organising, or to request a sort of demo or further more in-depth technical conversation. And for now, thank you for attending, and I hope you found the session useful. Thank you.